delighted to be joined by Dr. Natalie Sabanadze, a senior research fellow at Chatham House's Russia and Eurasia programme. Natalie, the Black Sea, perched between Europe and Asia, is now and has long been a geopolitical tension point. Why is this, and why has it become so important for Russia's strategy?
Thanks for having me, Stuart, and it's great to address your audience. Indeed, it has been a geopolitical tension point for a very long time, but it has been particularly important for Russia. And I would argue, from the Western point of view, it has been rather a neglected area in terms of its importance and security implications for Europe and broader region and even Middle East. So Russia looks at the Black Sea as essential for its own sort of post-Cold War new imperial identity. Because after the collapse of the Soviet Union, Russia was searching for a new type of identity. What kind of state is it going to be? And true to its tradition, it has decided that it will not be a state within the boundaries of Russian Federation, Russia as a nation state. It has always thought to be bigger than that. And the Black Sea for this is important historically from Russia's point of view, and I will explain a little bit more on this. So there is a domestic identity-related aspect. Then there is Russia's global ambitions, where sort of domestic and global ambitions meet in the Black Sea. Russia needs Black Sea warm water port. It is the base of its Black Sea fleet that is sort of traditionally and historically pride of Russian Empire and then Soviet Empire. And in the late Putinist period, Russia is using the Black Sea to project its influence and power, to regain its sort of previously lost global power status, to project influence in the Black Sea, in the Middle East, in the Mediterranean, in the Balkans, and further to support its operations in Africa. So Russia's global ambitions are very much tied to the Black Sea. Furthermore, it is essential for the way Russia sees itself, its vision, what kind of power is it going to be in this sort of emerging multipolar world. Russia has been pushing for this idea of multipolarity, pushing against the Western and particularly US dominance that has characterized the post-Cold War period. And now we see even the US with the statements of Secretary of State Marco Rubio that, unipolar moment was a kind of an anomaly, an exception. It is being more or less embraced by different actors. So where Russia stands, is it going to be one of the essential global centers of power or not? And for this, dominating Black Sea is essential. So this has become even more important, and now the perception of the West of the importance of the Black Sea has finally sort of become evident, because the war that Russia is waging against Ukraine, I would argue, is very much about the domination of the Black Sea and what kind of state it will be, how it will regain its positions, and how it will react and cooperate or compete with other centers of power, particularly the US, the West, the EU, China, and other emerging powers. So this is all connected, and this connection somehow happens in this area, which is very fragmented. It's characterized by what can be described as sort of variable geography. You have countries that used to be part of the former Soviet Union. You have Ukraine, Georgia on the coast, then beyond Moldova. Then you have the Caucasus, which is essential, Turkey, which is a member of NATO, plus Romania and Bulgaria. And then Romania and Bulgaria are also EU member states, with Ukraine and Georgia and Moldova trying to join EU. So all these developments that have been taking place slowly somehow gained particular urgency in the context of Russia's aggression against Ukraine.
Has this push to dominate this region, is it a personal quest for Vladimir Putin?
No, it's not a personal quest. I mean, it is important for Putin to put Russia back on the map of the global powers. That is true, and Black Sea is important. But it has been very important in Russia's vision, in the Russians' understanding of the global affairs for a very long time. And if you look at what Russia does now, what he does personally, there is quite a degree of continuity. There is also adaptation, because obviously circumstances change. The war is going on. The global response to the war is different, for example, from 2008 war against Georgia, which was also taking place in the Black Sea. But the instruments that Russia is using, the understanding of the strategic importance of this area for Russia, this is not new, and this is a major continuity. So it's quite interesting to look where instruments and approaches have changed and how they have adapted from Moscow's perspective and what remains the same in order to anticipate Russia's further moves in the region and how far Russia will go. Because now the question is, there's discussion going on about potential peace deals, ceasefire, what have you. Will Russia stop where it is now? Will it actually contend freezing the line? Will it stop short of taking Odessa, for example, and completely cutting Ukraine off the Black Sea? These are all extremely important questions that will have defining consequences for European security, not only for Ukraine's security. And I think in order to anticipate Russia's moves, we have to look at these patterns of continuity and adaptation.
One element of adaptation, perhaps, was Ukraine defeating Russia's Black Sea naval fleet back in the early part of the 2022
Absolutely.
war.
Yeah.
How damaging was that to Russia's self-image and to its kind of maritime power?
It has been significantly damaging. And actually, we can say that at sea, in this war, Russia has been defeated. And it was the most unexpected turn of events because Ukraine lost all its fleet in the beginning of the war. And Ukraine managed to develop capabilities, mount an extremely effective asymmetric warfare, and basically neutralizing Russian Black Sea fleet through the use of naval drones, most of them locally produced, and have been sort of refining these techniques. So Russia lost about 1/3 of its Black Sea fleet to Ukrainian attack. It had to retreat from its base, and it's now mainly in Novorossiysk. It is also started building a new naval base or expanding existing one in the occupied region of Abkhazia, which is officially Georgia. This is a very small and shallow port, but there are works going on to expand it. And this would be important for Russia in the future because Russia is obviously learning lessons from this defeat. And it will try to reconstitute its naval power as soon as possible. Russia has adopted a naval strategy, projecting sort of reconstitution, the plans for reconstitution for 2050. It's conducted exercises which precisely takes into consideration lessons learned. So, in fact, Ukraine's use of asymmetric warfare has been one of the main constraints preventing Russia to fulfill its ambitions, its wartime ambitions. Another constraint has also been the role of Turkey, and we can talk about it, particularly the closure of straits, which does not allow Russia to reinforce its fleet now. This is one of the reasons why Ukraine has been effective, because according to the 1936 Montreux Convention, Turkey basically controls the straits and it can close them to belligerent vassals. So as Russian fleet is being battered by Ukrainian drones, it has no capacity at the moment as the straits are closed to reinforce the fleet, so it has to retreat. And that has enabled Ukraine to continue its effective campaign.
How does Turkey see this push to dominate an area that Turkey also, and a neighbourhood that Turkey also increasingly tries to be friendly with those countries?
Yes.
Does it see Russia as a competition, or perhaps just someone to keep at arm's length?
Both. And Turkey has been extremely careful at navigating this situation with the war. And relations between Russia and Turkey historically have ebbed and flowed. There was a moment when there was a considerable rapprochement, even personal rapport between Putin and Erdogan. And Russia was extremely content with Turkey's deteriorating relations with its NATO partners and EU member states. This situation has changed now. Now, Turkey has not joined sanctions. Turkey has not openly taken antagonistic position to Russia as part of its careful, balanced policy. But at the same time, Turkey and Ukraine have strategic partnership. And Turkey has been one of the first to supply drones to Ukraine from the very beginning of this war. And it is in Turkey's interest to see that Russia does not regain Soviet-style hegemony in the Black Sea. So, in fact, maintaining Ukraine as a Black Sea power and even building up is, in fact, in Turkey's interest. It's almost a unique situation where a country such as Turkey has managed to pursue policy that has somehow kept satisfied both Russia and Ukraine at the same time. Now, as the war continues, the power dynamic between Turkey and Russia has changed as well. Before, Russia clearly had an upper hand. Ankara knew it. There was a great dependence on Russian energy, trade, etc. So the behavior was particularly cautious. Now things are changing because Turkey's naval forces, with the problems that Russia is facing, are becoming strong. Turkey's power projection is becoming stronger in Russia's neighborhood, particularly in the Caucasus, with the cooperation with Azerbaijan and the collapse of Nagorno-Karabakh, which was a conflict that was going on for a long time, with the fall of Assad in the Middle East as well. Turkey is in a stronger position than Russia is. Russia was supporting Assad. There is a growing competition in Central Asia between Turkey and Russia, what Turkey sees as a Turkic world, but Russia sees as its near abroad, and also in Africa. So there are different layers of competition and cooperation, and which one of these prevails very much depends on circumstances. There is one area where Turkey and Russia agree when it comes to the Black Sea, and that is regional ownership. So Turkey, together with Russia, is against non-littoral presence. So presence of, for instance, NATO vessels or NATO forces that are not from the littoral states. Turkey has always been against it. And that has also complicated, for instance, cooperation between NATO littoral member states. And Russia was also against it. So this is one area where they agree. But fundamentally, they diverge about Ukraine. Ukraine, from Turkey's perspective, needs to stay on the Black Sea, needs to remain maritime power. Their cooperation continues so that they together can more effectively balance out Russia.
Like Turkey, there are two other countries around the Black Sea that are NATO members, Bulgaria, Romania.
Yes.
What are the prospects of perhaps Georgia or Ukraine ever making it into NATO?
Well, at the moment, the prospects are not very good. Because when there was a push in 2008 for both Georgia and Ukraine to receive membership action plan, we know what happened. Russia invaded Georgia. Now, with the war in Ukraine, the main power behind NATO, which is the United States, is not keen on having Ukraine join NATO anytime soon. This is why we're talking about alternative security guarantees for Ukraine as part of the negotiations that are now happening. Georgia has taken a considerable U-turn. Georgia in the region and around the coast has been one of the most staunch pro-Western U.S. allies until very recently, and now it isn't anymore. Now it has really changed and is closer to Russia in many respects. It's much more under Russian influence by the decision of the ruling Georgian Dream Party. So we will have to see what happens, whether NATO expands in the Black Sea or not. But a lot depends on the outcome of the war, how the geopolitical landscape of the Black Sea will be shaped. Because if Ukraine receives security guarantees, even if they're short of NATO membership for the time being, but they're strong, if Odessa is secured, and Odessa is one of the most important ports through which Ukrainian grain goes, as well as Russia uses Black Sea ports for its exports, for its commodities, particularly grain, but also fertilizers. For Ukraine's economic viability, maintaining Odessa is essential. It is also essential for European security, because if Odessa is cut from Ukraine, Moldova is right there on the border. Moldova will be destabilized. If Moldova is destabilized, so is Romania, which is a NATO member state, and through that you can also influence the Balkans. So if Odessa is secure, if Ukraine is secure, and Ukraine manages to go into the EU accession fast, and now this is of course a big if, because NATO and EU accession has always gone hand in hand, this pattern will have to be broken in case of Ukraine, then it would be a different situation. And this is something that would not be easy for Russia to accept, because, and I have always maintained that Russia's ambitions in this war are not territorial. They're not exclusively territorial. Now, Black Sea is largely a closed sea, and controlling as much of the coastline as possible is important, and that is territorial. But the ambitions are bigger. It is about Ukraine, what Russia calls as anti-Russia. So something that is antithetical to Russia, its form of governance, its position in the world. Ukraine, democratic, secure member of the European Union, is not something that Russia will see as unthreatening and acceptable.
A lot of European analysts talk about the danger of Russian intentions towards those countries on the Baltic Sea who have taken that path through EU accession and joining NATO. How should Europe be looking at these Black Sea states? Should it be most worried about the Baltic or most worried about the Black Sea?
So up until now, basically every time Russia moved in the Black Sea, the NATO's response was to strengthen the Baltic and the sort of northern eastern flank. That is right, because these states, particularly Baltic states, are vulnerable, and they're also the ones who are particularly championing the cause of strengthening NATO presence on their territories. In addition, now we have Finland and Sweden joining NATO, which is not exactly the best outcome from the point of view of Russia. So Russia feels squeezed out of the Baltics, which means that the Black Sea will become even more important for Russia as a source of vulnerability and the possibility to exploit this vulnerability. So I think it is very important, while strengthening the northern flank is good, you cannot ignore the south, because south becomes particularly vulnerable, and this is where Russia will try its best, and Russia is fighting precisely for this. So the approach, probably a new one, should somehow tie these two seas together. Now, I mentioned that it has been perceived as largely marginal from the Western security point of view, and this response to strengthening the Baltic while the war was going on in the Black Sea is one example. Another example is that, the EU did not have a Black Sea strategy up until a few months ago. Now it does, and it is full of good intentions. It does have a security component, maritime hub, etc. But the modalities, how it will be operationalized, how the early warning system that is envisaged there will be translated into early action if necessary, these elements are missing. And here too, it is essential that Turkey is on board. I'm not sure Turkey is at this point. So building European strategy towards the Black Sea will have to include Turkey, will have to include UK, and it should reflect the intensity and the urgency of the threat. They should be reflected in the response that Western allies, NATO and European Union member states are coming up with.
We've talked a lot about NATO, about Europe. Is there a role for the US, or has the US just walked away from engaging with the Black Sea?
The US is less and less engaged in the Black Sea. Now, Romania, which is one of the littoral states that you mentioned, a member of NATO, has always been very active in trying to bring as much US presence as possible. Romania has been advocating greater NATO presence on its territory, and by doing so, sort of bringing more NATO. With the Trump administration, there is an impression that the Black Sea as such is not of major security concern, which makes it even greater security concern for Europe, because Europeans are trying to have a say in the arrangements around the peace deal precisely because it concerns the Black Sea and it will have direct implications for its security. So far, any arrangement still envisages U.S. presence, U.S. backstop, U.S. support, whether it's through air or somehow. So the U.S. will have to remain, but the burden of decision-making and strategic thinking and actually putting in place viable security arrangements may have to fall on Europe.
Dr. Natalie Sabanadze of Chatham House, thank you very much.
Thank you.